The fluorescent lights of the grocery store buzzed above me, casting a sterile glow over the aisles of canned goods and cereal boxes. I stood there, clutching a jar of marinara sauce, its weight grounding me as my son's voice sliced through the air. "Put it back, Mom. You're broke." Ethan's words were sharp, his 8-year-old face twisted with a mix of embarrassment and defiance. The other shoppers turned, their eyes darting toward us, and I felt the heat of their stares like a spotlight. My hand trembled, but I reached into my purse, pulled out a crumpled stack of 20s from my personal account, the one I'd kept secret from everyone, even my husband, and paid the cashier in cash. The look on Ethan's face softened, but the sting of his words lingered, a wound that reopened old scars. I wasn't broke. Not yet. But the truth was more complicated than he could understand. It wasn't just about money. It was about everything I'd lost, everything I'd fought for, and the revenge I'd been quietly planning for years. My name is Emily, and I wasn't always this woman haggard, worn, standing in a grocery store fighting tears over a jar of sauce. 10 years ago, I had a life others envied, a loving husband, Mark, a thriving career as a financial advisor, and a family that felt unbreakable. But that was before my sister, Claire, betrayed me, before she stole everything, my reputation, my savings, my trust. Claire, with her charming smile and calculated lies, had framed me for embezzlement at the firm we both worked for. I lost my job, my license, and nearly my freedom. Mark stood by me, but the strain cracked our marriage. And Ethan, barely a toddler then, grew up in the shadow of our struggles. Claire disappeared with the money, leaving me to rebuild from ashes. I swore I'd make her pay, not with violence, but with justice, cold, deliberate, and undeniable. The grocery store wasn't the first place Ethan had called me out. He'd seen the bills pile up, heard the arguments between Mark and me about money, about my late nights scouring old financial records, chasing leads on Claire. He didn't know the full story, only that his mom was broke and his dad was tired. But that day, as I handed the cashier the cash, I saw something shift in Ethan's eyes: confusion, maybe even guilt. I wanted to tell him everything, to explain that the money wasn't the point, that I was fighting for us, for him. But how do you tell a child that their aunt destroyed their family? How do you explain that revenge, however justified, eats at your soul? When we got home, Mark was in the kitchen, his shoulders slumped over a cup of cold coffee. He barely looked up as Ethan ran to his room, clutching the snacks I'd bought. "You okay?" Mark asked, his voice heavy with the weight of years. I nodded, but I wasn't. The truth was, I'd found something to lead on Claire. A bank statement from an offshore account, buried in a pile of documents I'd gotten from an old colleague. It was the first real proof I'd had in years that she was still out there, living off my stolen life. I didn't tell Mark. He'd stopped believing in justice long ago, worn down by my obsession. But I couldn't let it go. Not now. Not when I was so close. That night, I sat at my desk, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. The bank statement glowed on my laptop screen, a single line of numbers that felt like a lifeline. Claire was in Miami, or at least her money was. I'd spent years tracking her, piecing together her lies through old emails. forgotten contacts, and whispers from former coworkers. She'd built a new life, probably under a new name. But money leaves a trail, and I was good at following trails. Too good. Maybe. I'd sacrificed so much time with Ethan, intimacy with Mark, my own peace for this. But the thought of her living free while we struggled fueled me. I wasn't just chasing money. I was chasing the truth, the chance to make her face what she'd done. I closed my laptop and looked at the photo on my desk. Me, Mark, and Ethan at the beach. Back when life was simple. Ethan was laughing, his tiny hands clutching a seashell. I wanted that life back, or at least something close to it. But first, I needed Claire to pay. Not just for the money, but for the years she stole, the trust she shattered. I didn't know then how far I'd go, how much I'd risk, or how redemption would come not from revenge, but from the family I was fighting to save. The next morning, I woke to the smell of burnt toast and Ethan's laughter. Mark was attempting pancakes, a rare moment of normalcy in our fractured home. I watched them from the doorway, my heart aching at how easily Ethan smiled with his father. How rare those smiles were for me. I'd become the shadow in our house, the one always distracted, always chasing ghosts. Mark caught my eye and offered a small nod. But there was a question in his gaze. One he'd stopped asking out loud. When will you let this go? I couldn't answer. Not yet. The bank statement was still burning a hole in my mind. A beacon pulling me toward Miami. Toward Claire. I spent the day digging deeper. I called an old friend, Sarah, who still worked in finance. She'd always believed me about Claire, even when others turned away. You sure about this? She asked, her voice crackling over the phone. If you find her, then what? You can't undo the past. I didn't have an answer, only a fire in my chest that wouldn't let me stop. Sarah gave me a name, Victor Delgado, a private investigator who specialized in financial crimes. He wasn't cheap, but my secret account, the one I'd built from odd jobs and careful savings, could cover it. I didn't tell Mark about the call, or the account. He thought we were scraping by, and I let him believe it. The lie felt heavy, but so did the truth. Victor met me at a diner the next day. A gruff man with sharp eyes and a notepad full of scribbles. I slid the bank statement across the table, and he raised an eyebrow. This is solid, he said, tapping the paper. But offshore accounts are tricky. Whoever this is, they've covered their tracks well. I told him it was Claire, my sister, and his face softened. Just for a moment. Family's the worst kind of betrayal, he said, and I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. He agreed to take the case, promising to track the account to its source. But Emily, he warned, this kind of thing changes you. Be sure you're ready for what you find. I wasn't sure, but I nodded anyway. Back home, Ethan was sprawled on the living room floor, drawing superheroes in his sketchbook. Mom, why do you always look sad? He asked, not looking up. The question hit like a punch. I knelt beside him, searching for words. I'm just tired, buddy. I lied, ruffling his hair. He didn't push, but his eyes lingered on me, too perceptive for his age. I wondered what he saw, a mother who loved him, or a woman consumed by a vendetta. I wanted to be both, but the balance was slipping. That night, I dreamed of Claire. We were kids again, sharing a bedroom, whispering secrets under the covers. She was always the bold one, the one who'd sneak cookies or talk back to Mom. I adored her, followed her, trusted her. In the dream, she smiled that same charming smile, but it twisted. Her eyes cold as she handed me a stack of papers, me termination letter, my arrest warrant, my life in ruins. I woke gasping, my hands clenched into fists. The anger was still there, raw and alive, but so was something else, grief. I missed my sister, the one I thought I knew. I hated her, too, and the hate was winning. Victor called a week later with a lead. The account was linked to a shell company in Miami, and he'd found a name, Cassandra Lane. It wasn't Claire's name, but it felt like Hera, alias as smooth and deceptive as she was. Victor had an address, a high-end condo in South Beach. I can dig deeper, he said, but it'll cost more. I didn't hesitate. I transferred the money, draining half my secret account. Mark noticed my distraction at dinner, his fork pausing midair. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice low so Ethan wouldn't hear. I shrugged, muttering about work, but his eyes narrowed. He knew me too well, and I hated how much I was hiding from him. The plan was forming, though I didn't admit it to myself. I'd go to Miami, confront Claire, make her confess. I didn't know what came after justice, closure, or something darker. I told myself it was for Ethan, for Mark, for the life we deserved. But deep down, I knew it was for me. I needed to look into her eyes and see the truth, to make her feel the weight of what she'd done. As I tucked Ethan into bed that night, his small hand gripped mine. "Don't be sad, Mom," he whispered. I smiled, but my heart broke. I was doing this for him, but I was losing him in the process. Miami was a world away from our small, struggling town. I told Mark I was visiting an old friend, a lie that tasted bitter but necessary. Ethan hugged me tight before I left, his eyes searching mine. "Come back soon, Mom," he said, and I promised I would, though I wasn't sure what I'd be coming back to. The flight was short, but my mind churned, replaying every moment with Claire, her laughter, her betrayal, the way she'd vanished without a word. I'd spent years imagining this moment, but now that it was close, fear gnawed at me. What if she didn't care? What if she laughed in my face? Victor met me at a cafe near the condo, his laptop open to a map of South Beach. "Cassandra Lane lives on the 15th floor, he said, showing me photos of a sleek building with ocean views. "She's careful, but I've got a guy who can get us into the security system. We can see who comes and goes." I nodded, my stomach twisting. This was real now, not just a fantasy of revenge. I handed Victor another stack of cash, my secret account dwindling. He didn't ask questions, but his eyes held a warning. Don't lose yourself in this. That night, I stood across the street from the condo, watching the lights flicker in the windows. Was she up there, living a life built on my pain? I imagined her sipping wine, laughing with friends, untouched by the wreckage she'd left behind. The thought made my blood boil. But I forced myself to stay calm. I needed proof. A confession. Something to make her pay legally. Not just emotionally. Victor's contact came through the next day, a grainy video from the building's lobby. A woman stepped out of the elevator. Her hair dyed blonde, but her walk unmistakable. It was Claire. My heart pounded as I watched her smile at the doorman. Carefree. Untouchable. I wanted to scream, to run across the street and confront her. But I waited. Victor dug deeper, finding more accounts linked to Cassandra Lane. The money trail was complex, but it led back to the firm, to the funds she'd stolen. She's been laundering it through shell companies, Victor explained. Smart, but not smart enough. We can build a case, Emily. But you need to decide what you want: justice or something else. I didn't answer. Justice sounded clean. But the rage inside me wanted more: her fear, her regret, her ruin. I spent the next few days tailing her, blending into the Miami crowds. Claire Cassandra lived a polished life, designer clothes, fancy dinners, a new boyfriend who looked like he belonged in a magazine. Each glimpse of her happiness was a knife in my chest. I called Mark every night, lying about my friend, hating how distant his voice sounded. Ethan told me about a school project, his voice bright but tinged with worry. Are you okay, Mom? He asked, and I choked back tears. I'm fine, buddy, I said. But I wasn't. I was slipping, losing myself in the hunt. One night, I followed Claire to a rooftop bar. She was alone, sipping a martini, her eyes scanning the crowd. I stayed in the shadows, my heart racing. This was my chance. I approached, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Claire, I said, and her head snapped up, her eyes widening for a split second before the mask slid back into place. Emily, she said, her voice smooth, almost amused. What a surprise. No apology. No guilt, just that same infuriating smile. I wanted to slap it off her face, but I held back, my hands shaking. We need to talk, I said, and she laughed, a sound that cut deeper than Ethan's words in the store. She agreed to meet me the next day, at a park near the beach. I didn't sleep that night, my mind racing with what I'd say, what I'd do. I wanted her to confess, to beg for forgiveness. But I knew Claire'd never give me that. As the sun rose, I stared at my reflection in the hotel mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. Was this justice or obsession? I didn't know anymore, but I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when I was so close to making her pay. The park was quiet, the morning sun glinting off the ocean as I waited on a bench, my hands clasped to stop their trembling. Claire arrived late, her blonde hair catching the light, her sunglasses hiding her eyes. She sat across from me, her posture relaxed, as if this were a casual catch-up between sisters, not a reckoning. What do you want, Emily? She asked, her voice cool, almost bored. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her feel the weight of the decade she'd stolen from me. Instead, I pulled out the bank statement, sliding it across the table. I know what you did, I said, my voice low but steady. I have proof. Her lips twitched, but she didn't flinch. Proof of what? That I'm living my life, she said, leaning back. You always were dramatic. Her dismissal was a slap, but I'd expected it. Claire was a master at twisting the truth, at making you doubt yourself. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. You framed me. You took everything me job, my savings, my family's future. You don't get to walk away from that. For a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw something fear, maybe, or guilt, but it vanished as quickly as it came. She stood, brushing imaginary sand from her skirt. You're chasing ghosts, Emily. Let it go. She turned to leave, but I grabbed her arm, my fingers digging in harder than I meant. Confess, I hissed, or I'll make sure everyone knows who Cassandra Lane really is. Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her confidence. Be careful, she said softly. You don't know what you're playing with. She pulled free and walked away, leaving me shaking with rage and something else doubt. I called Victor from the park, my voice trembling as I told him what happened. She's rattled, he said. That's good. Means we're close. But you need to decide how far you're willing to go. I didn't have an answer. Part of me wanted to call the police. Hand over the evidence. Let the system handle her. But another part, darker and hungrier, wanted to confront her again, to make her feel the pain she'd caused. I spent the day pacing my hotel room, replaying our conversation, her smug smile burning into my memory. She thought she'd won, that I'd give up. She was wrong. That night, Victor sent me new information, a photo of Claire with a man, someone high up in Miami's financial scene. He's connected, Victor said. If she's with him, she's got protection. You push too hard. You might get hurt. I didn't care. I was past caring about myself. This was about Ethan. About Mark. About the life we'd lost. I told Victor to keep digging. To find anything that could tie Claire to the embezzlement. My account was nearly empty now. But I didn't stop. Couldn't. When I called Mark that evening, his voice was strained. Ethan's asking for you, he said. He's worried. So am I. I wanted to tell him everything. To confess the lies. The money. The trip. But I couldn't. Not yet. I'll be home soon, I said, my throat tight. I promise. But as I hung up, I wondered if I was lying again. The truth was, I didn't know who I was anymore, a mother, a wife, or a woman consumed by vengeance. The next day, I followed Claire again, this time to a charity gala. She was radiant, mingling with Miami's elite, her laughter carrying over the crowd. I stood outside, watching through the glass, my hands clenched into fists. Victor had given me more evidence, emails between Claire and her boyfriend, hinting at money laundering. It was enough to go to the authorities. But I hesitated. A police report was clean, impersonal. I wanted her to see me, to know it was me who brought her down. I wanted her to feel the weight of her sins. As I watched her, a memory surfaced, Claire teaching me to ride a bike, her hands steady on the handlebars, her voice encouraging. I pushed it away, but it lingered, a reminder of the sister I'd loved. Was she still in there? Somewhere? Or was she gone? Replaced by this cold, calculating woman? I didn't know, but I was about to find out. I slipped into the gala, my heart pounding, ready to confront her one last time. The gala was a blur of glittering chandeliers and clinking glasses, the air thick with perfume and ambition. I felt out of place in my simple dress, my hands still trembling from the confrontation I knew was coming. Claire was across the room, her laughter ringing out as she charmed a group of suits. I moved through the crowd, my eyes locked on her, my heart a drumbeat of rage and resolve. This was the moment I'd been chasing for years. I didn't have a plan. Not really. Just a burning need to make her face me, to admit what she'd done. I caught her eye as I approached, and her smile faltered, just for a second. She excused herself from the group and met me near a quiet corner, her expression a mix of irritation and wariness. "You don't give up, do you?" she said, her voice low. I shook my head, pulling out the emails Victor had sent, holding them like a weapon. "These tie you to the money, Claire. To what you did to me. It's over." She glanced at the papers, her face unreadable, then laughed a sharp, bitter sound. "You think a few emails will ruin me? You have no idea who you're dealing with." Her words were a challenge, but they also cracked something open inside me. I saw Ethan's face, his voice in the store, the way he'd looked at me like I was failing him. I saw Mark's tired eyes, the distance growing between us. And I saw myself, consumed by this hunt, losing everything that mattered. "I know exactly who you are," I said, my voice steady now. "You're my sister. And you betrayed me." For the first time, her mask slipped fully, and I saw something raw guilt, maybe, or shame. But she recovered quickly, her eyes hardening. "Go home, Emily," she said. "This isn't your fight anymore." I didn't move. Couldn't. To come too far. Sacrificed too much. But as I stood there, the emails in my hand, I felt a shift. Revenge wasn't enough. It wouldn't bring back the years, the trust, the life we'd had. I wanted justice, but I also wanted something else: closure, redemption, a way to heal. "Confess," I said, my voice softer now. "Not to me, to the police. Do one thing right, Claire. For once." She stared at me, her eyes searching mine, and for a moment, I thought she might break. But she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I left the gala, my heart heavy but clearer. I called Victor and told him to send the evidence to the authorities. "You sure?" he asked. "This could drag on, get messy." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "It's not about winning anymore," I said. "It's about doing what's right." I hung up and stared at the Miami skyline, the lights blurring through my tears. I thought confronting Claire would fix everything, but it hadn't. The hole in my heart was still there, and I realized it wasn't just about her. It was about me, about the choices I'd made, the family I'd neglected. When I got back to the hotel, I called Mark. His voice was wary, but I didn't hold back this time. I told him everything: the secret account, the trip, Claire, the evidence. He was quiet for a long time, then said, "Come home. We need you." His words broke something in me, a dam I'd built to keep the pain at bay. I cried, promising I'd be on the next flight. I didn't know if he'd forgive me, if we could rebuild, but I had to try. The next morning, I packed my bag, my heart lighter but still aching. Victor called with news the police were interested in the evidence. But Claire had vanished again, her condo empty. I wasn't surprised. She'd always been good at running. But this time, I wasn't chasing her. I'd done what I could, handed over the truth. The rest was out of my hands. As I boarded the plane, I thought of Ethan, of his smile, his sketches, his trust. I'd been fighting for him, but I'd forgotten to fight for us. That was about to change. The flight home felt endless, each minute stretching as I replayed the last decade in my mind. I saw Claire's face at the gala, her defiance masking something broken. I saw Ethan's embarrassment in the store, his small voice cutting through my defenses. I saw Mark's tired eyes, the love still there but buried under years of strain. I'd been so focused on justice, on making Claire pay, that I'd lost sight of what mattered most. The plane landed, and I stepped into the airport, my heart pounding with a new kind of funnet of Claire, but of facing my family, of admitting how far I'd strayed. Mark was waiting at baggage claim, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. Ethan was with him, clutching a drawing, his view artifact.